It's the most popular tree in the houseplant canon. Let's talk about ficus. What's up, fellow plant enthusiasts? My name is Dylan, and this is Baines Botanicals. Today, we're going to be talking about ficus. These are also known as fig trees because of the edible fruit that they bear when they're adults. Most of the figs that you would actually buy in the grocery store are going to come from Ficus carica, which doesn't actually make a very good houseplant. Just because of the type of tree it is, it just doesn't really grow well indoors. But that is where most of our figs come from. Fig Newtons, for instance. Let's do this first. Here is the taxonomy information for ficus, and we are actually in the family Moraceae. And this is really the only major houseplant that is in the family Moraceae. Some other notable plants that are in Moraceae would be mulberries, the breadfruit tree, which breadfruit is a staple food in other parts of the world, not so much here in the US. And also a tree called an Osage orange, which in kind of the autumn, these trees will get fruit on them that looks like a tennis ball. They're bright neon yellow, and they're kind of wrinkled, kind of like a brain, but they're spherical. They look like tennis balls. It's kind of bizarre. Now let's talk about the different species that are in ficus. I don't normally do this, but ficus actually mean a lot to me because my mom had a lot of ficus plants, and I've always thought that they're just really interesting just because of the variety, the amount of variety that's in the single genus. So I think the most famous one is going to be Ficus Lorata. They have a very unique shaped leaf, and they tend to get extremely big. There are a couple dwarf varieties that you can get in the market, but typically Ficus Lorata gets gigantic to the point that you have to stop repotting it, otherwise it'll just keep growing. And I know I have heard people say that they've gotten rid of them just because they outgrow their homes. So if you find a good place for it with a lot of light and everything and you're taking care of it, be ready for it to outgrow your space. Did I say that they're called fiddle leaf figs? If I missed that, they're called fiddle leaf figs is the common name. There is a version that is variegated, but the variegation is very unstable, so it's not really on the market. You can get them from private sellers and things, but I wouldn't recommend it just because they're typically overpriced for the fact that the variegation doesn't hold. The next one that is probably pretty famous would be Ficus Elastica, the rubber tree, and aptly named because they do have rubber inside of them, or I should say that the latex in them can make a very low-grade rubber, so it's not really harvested for that, but it is possible. The dark green leaves are very attractive. That's probably the most famous one just because it can tolerate lower light. Because the green of the leaves is so dark, it has so much chlorophyll in it, it doesn't quite need as much light. They can take a lot of light, but you'll see those in malls sometimes here in the US anyway, because they just don't need that much light. There is a variegated version. There's a pink variegation. There is a white variegation. I believe that one's called Taniki. I forget what the pink one's called. And then there's a newer one. It's actually not new. It's kind of an interesting story, but it was gone for a long time and they recently brought it back, called Shiveriana. It's kind of a chartreuse yellow leaf, kind of like a neon pothos with dark green, not polka dots, dark green speckles. Very interesting looking, very unique. There's not really another variegation style like that. So Ficus Elastica is a great beginner plant, especially if you're wanting to get into ficus plants. That's a good one to start with. On the other end of that spectrum is Ficus Benjamina, which are probably the most... When I think of a ficus tree, that's the one I think of, Ficus Benjamina. But it's known as a weeping fig because when you change anything about it, its watering schedule, its temperature, its location, its light, they have a tendency to shed their leaves. And sometimes they shed their leaves quite a bit. And that's why they're called weeping, because they cry. And I remember being a kid, my mom had a gigantic one, and especially when the season changed, it would just shed a lot of leaves, and who do you think had to pick them up? Me. But still, good memories. But if you're looking for an interesting tree for your house and you don't mind a high maintenance plant, Ficus Benjamina is a good one. There are a couple different variegations for it as well. There's one that has kind of a light green variegation. And I'm sorry that I don't know these variegation names because they're called different things. It's similar to common names, how houseplants will have multiple common names. It's the same way with variegation styles. There's kind of an albo variegation that's actually white, and there is also one called Starlight that has like light green leaves with some white variegation. Basically, there's a color for everybody. The next one is actually one that I have here. This is the Ficus Audrey, and Audrey is the common name. The botanical name is Ficus Benjamina. I'm butchering the name, I apologize. That's why I just call it Ficus Audrey, because it's easier to say. But I love Ficus Audrey. This is probably my favorite ficus because I love the color of the leaves, how they're just kind of a nice plain green with this yellow, the yellow veining and everything. Is venation a word? I feel like there's a word for veins. Anyway, and the way they grow, like look at this. This is just a nice looking plant. And it's going to get big. It'll get big like a tree. A houseplant tree, I should say. But of course, in the wild, these are trees. They get secondary growth. They bear fruit. They're gigantic. They're amazing. So I love this one the best. The next one is very similar to this, called Ficus Altisma. Ficus Altisma, instead of having kind of these fuzzy leaves, because these are a little fuzzy on top, Ficus Altisma leaves are smooth. They're a lighter green, and the margin on the edge is actually yellow. So it's a little more striking if you're looking for something that's kind of showy. And the care is about the same. Both of these, both the Audrey and the Altisma, aren't too hard to care for. So also, I would say these are good beginner plants in the realm of ficus. I've got my list here. What else have we got? There's one called Ficus Danela. I've also heard it called Ficus Moclame. I don't know if those are two different species, but the trees that I've seen, they always look about the same. They have the shape of a leaf kind of like a Ficus Benjamina, only it's thicker and waxier. And I haven't actually owned one myself, but I have to imagine that they're not too difficult to care for just because they are a little bit thicker as far as the leaf goes. What else? I feel like I'm missing a big one. Oh, umbellata. Ficus umbellata has huge leaves on it, and they, excuse me, they are paper thin. These paper thin leaves make me think that it is going to be a little harder to care for because, again, I've never had one. I don't have room for something that big right now. As you guys can see, I have a lot of plants. And Ficus umbellata, it's going to become a tree, of course. And the fact that the leaves are so thin make me think that it's going to be susceptible to underwatering and susceptible to low humidity. So I just feel like a lot of the ones I've seen in stores, they've already started getting crunchy leaves and everything. And it's just kind of disappointing. So one that has similar leaf shape to that, but is a little more unusual, is going to be the rock ficus, rock fig. That is Ficus Pedis. I didn't even know it. I had to write it down. Ficus Pedis is actually a succulent, and it's a little more unusual. The base of it looks kind of like a Bocarnia, the ponytail plant, not ponytail palm, because it's not a palm. Like I said, I don't know a ton about those just because they're a little harder to find, and I don't know. They don't really interest me. They don't get a lot of leaves on them, especially when they're younger. So, oh, I missed a big one actually. Ficus Ali. Ficus Ali is similar to a Ficus Benjamina, except the leaves are really, really long. They're really long, and they're actually quite waxy, meaning they're a little more rigid. The cuticle in the leaf is a little bit thicker. And Ficus Ali is a very striking plant. Did I already use that adjective? I think I did. But it's just, there's really no other leaves like that, especially on a houseplant tree. So if you want an interesting ficus that people are going to be like, wow, what is that? Ficus Ali is a good one. It's a little finicky, just like the Ficus Benjamina, so you got to keep an eye on like the temperature and everything. Don't move it a bunch because it's not going to like that. But let's transition into the trailing ficuses. There's only a couple, and this one, we'll get to that. The one that's the most common is going to be Ficus pumila, and Ficus pumila is really difficult to take care of. I'm just going to be honest. Somebody had the audacity to be like, oh, it's so easy. It's not. The problem with Ficus pumila is those tiny little paper-thin leaves that it gets. They need high humidity. They're more like a fern, really. They need high humidity. They don't really like to dry out. If it dries out, it's going to start disintegrating, like the leaves will just turn to dust. So I don't really think they're that easy, but that's just me. They are pretty. They have a couple of different variegation patterns. There is one where the leaves are kind of crinkled and there's a yellow center in the middle. I've heard it called Ficus Doherty. No, I'm sorry, not Ficus Doherty. I've heard the variegation pattern called Doherty. And there is also one that the leaves are flat, but the margin of them are white, like snow white. That's my favorite personally. I've had a few over the years, but they always die. But I know if I find a small pot of it, I'll probably buy it again and just try it again. I'm going to master those. I'm going to do it, I swear. But similar to Ficus pumila is this one. And this one is called Ficus vaccinioides. Vaccinioides, however you want to say it. It has more traditionally shaped ficus leaves, kind of that oblong with a point on the end. And it is really pretty, I think, for kind of a trailing plant. And it's pretty rare, to be honest. Like, I don't see these that much. This one's actually from Costa Farms, and I got this at Lowe's. And I see these come through stores maybe once a year, just because they're a little more uncommon. I don't think they're in demand that much, just because, yes, it is just kind of plain green. You know, if this was outside, if this were outside, you'd probably look right past it. Of course, you wouldn't see it outside in the US because it would die because it gets too cold. But I'm hoping this one is going to be a little easier to care for than the Ficus pumila because the leaves are a little bit thicker. Well, maybe they're not that much thicker. Don't die. I like you a lot. But we're going to try it again because I had one before a few years ago and I think I overwatered it because anyway, it was a mess. This one's going to do better. We got it. On my list, I think I've covered everything except, some species of bonsai trees are actually ficus. Ficus ginseng specifically. There may actually be another one. But ficus ginseng is usually the one you see. And they have leaves kind of like this, but they're bigger and waxier. When you see some bonsai trees, the leaves look more like pine or maybe a juniper that you would see outside. But certain ones are going to be in the ficus genus. I've never actually had a bonsai tree, and we carry some at work. I'm tempted to get one. They're very structurally interesting, and they can really add a zen element to a room, and they're a great tabletop plant. I guess my thing is that, I don't know, I like when things grow bigger, and those wouldn't really grow super big, but it can be really cool to prune them and shape them. I don't know, there's an art to it for sure. I think I've covered most of the species that I wanted to cover. That's most of the major ones. I think that was 10. Anyway, let's get to the care. So the care is going to vary from plant to plant. This is just sort of a general care. I'll call out any exceptions. As far as light goes, since they are trees, except for the trailing ones, they do like bright light. They don't really like anything less than bright light, except for the dark green version of the Ficus Elastica. Like I mentioned earlier, it can take lower light. As far as watering goes, they want to dry out just for a second. Like, let them dry all the way out and then water them, because they don't like to stay dry by any means, but they also don't want to be soaking wet. They want to be fairly consistently moist with just a little edge of drying out. And of course, that's going to vary house to house depending on how you water and what the temperature is and everything. But generally, you want to make sure that I don't really like where that's at. You want to make sure that you're watering them consistently. So don't water once every 2 weeks and then water like back to back right after or something, because they don't like that. They like the consistency, and that will keep them from dropping their leaves and throwing a fit. Next would be soil, just any regular houseplant soil. They don't really like anything specific, just something that is draining like a houseplant soil would be. And fertilize them bi-weekly in the growing season, and then not at all during the off season, like late fall, winter, early spring, because they do go kind of dormant. Now they're not going to go into a hard dormancy, like drop other leaves and stuff, but like I said, the Benjamina, it will drop leaves. But they do go kind of dormant, so don't fertilize them in the winter. And then humidity, they do prefer humidity. Like I said, the trailing ones need high humidity, but the trees, they don't need as much, but they do need some. They don't like to be in really dry areas. That will cause them some stress. And speaking of stress, all ficus plants in general have a reputation for being a little finicky, and some more than others, like the weeping fig, like the creeping figs. And it's really just consistency and care and not neglecting them that will help them thrive, and not moving them a lot. They don't like to be moved. Weeping fig especially, but no ficus plant really likes to be relocated to a different area without a little bit of acclimation first. So that can be tricky, but if you find a place where it's growing well, leave it. I mean, just leave it there and don't mess with it, and it should do just fine. I want to say that's about all I have about ficus. Like I said, it's just one of my favorites. This video ran long. Most of my plant care videos don't run this long, but I really wanted to go into detail because, like I said, I love ficus plants. Let me know if you guys have any species of ficus that I didn't mention, and let me know what your experience is with ficus in general, because I know almost everybody has owned a ficus at one point if you don't actually own one already. But thank you guys so much for watching this video. Thank you so much for supporting me. I need to catch up on some of my comments, and yeah, you guys are the best. And I love learning from you guys, and I love getting suggestions of things to buy, even though I shouldn't be buying stuff. Look around. But thank you guys so much, and I'm going to get another video out to you real soon. So until then, thank you.